like to welcome you to the show. Patrick, how are you today?
I'm fine, Mike, and thanks for having me back on.
Absolutely, man. So I understand you're on a layover right now in San Francisco. To and from where?
Yep, I'm here in San Francisco. Came in from Boston, which is where I live. It's an interesting month for me, schedule-wise. San Francisco, now later in the month, or later in July, I'm going to be in Copenhagen. I'm going to be in Ghana, in West Africa. So suffice it to say, I get around.
Very good. Well, I know I've been spending some time on your website, askthepilot.com. I'm on there right now, as a matter of fact. And I encourage everybody that wants to listen along with us, go to askthepilot.com. There's tons of information there. But you have been a commercial pilot for a long time. And I've never asked you this. Do you have a military background? I know many of the guys do.
No, I do not. I came up through the civilian ranks. And, you know, nowadays, most new hire pilots at the airlines come up through civilian channels, not through the military. It's not the way it used to be. There's still a pretty good number that do come through the military, but not the 80-90% or whatever as it was in decades past.
Right. Well, so as a young guy, you were kind of interested in just flying. You got kind of the bug as a teenager?
Well, flying, that's an interesting word. The way it happened for me was maybe a little different from how other pilots were inspired. When I was a little kid, I got into airlines. I was into airplanes, of course, but I was also into the industry in the broader sense, as I like to call it, grand theater of air travel. I was into airports, and I was into the places that airlines flew to. And so, by extension, being into planes got me into geography and into travel and into exploring other places and cultures. I've traipsed off to, I think, about 90 countries at this point, and that all goes back to being into planes and into airlines when I was a little kid, and one led to the other. Most people see flying as just an inconvenient means to an end, where I see it as part of the journey. It's how you get to where you're going, and those things are linked in a way that, most people just don't consider or don't appreciate anymore, of course.
Yeah.
It's tough to present it that way if you're, flying from St. Louis to Baltimore, who cares?
Right.
But when you're flying to, I don't know, China or Africa or somewhere more, to use a politically incorrect term, exotic, it becomes kind of a more meaningful part of the experience. The flight does. Yeah,
I've never really heard anybody else describe it that way. I really can relate to that a lot because as a kid, I grew up, my dad was in the Air Force. So, we were getting orders every couple of years to go to different places. And sometimes, like on the first one, it was on a ship going to Okinawa from San Francisco, which was pretty exciting, which I think led me to my fascination for the sea. But we flew from, and this is going to date me a little bit, but we flew from the West Coast, L.A., to Morocco in a prop plane back in the day, and talk about lots of stops and lots of interesting things and looking down and looking at different landscapes and stuff. And that was my fascination, and to this day it is. I can actually just roll up to an airport and smell the exhaust and just start tripping on that like, okay, we're going somewhere. I love it.
Yeah, and not to over-romanticize it, but you can get on an airplane in whatever big city and fly halfway around the world nonstop in a matter of hours. And that's pretty amazing when you really think about it. Trips that used to take months in a sailing ship, we can now do in half a day routinely. And not just that, but we can do it in almost perfect safety, which is remarkable. And at airfares nowadays that are just a few pennies per mile.
Yeah.
Flying is cheap, and that's lost on a lot of people. I think most folks out there don't remember how expensive flying once was and how only a certain fraction of the population could afford to do it at all. And now, pretty much anybody can afford to fly, at least sometimes, and that was not always the case. And I think that's interesting and ironic when you consider how much griping people do about airfares. And fares today, last statistic I saw, are about half of what they were 30 years ago, and that's after you factor in all of those ancillary fees that airlines love nowadays, all the little extras.
Right.
People hate those because they feel so nickel and dimed. But in a way, they're a good idea because they allow certain people to pay for certain extras they want that not everybody wants. And that helps keep the prices down for all travelers.
No, I agree. I mean, it's the a la carte menu system, I think, is
Right.
more effective because, as you say, certain people, they want to have those. They want to bring 5 bags with them, and other people just want to throw a day pack on their back and not even check it in. Speaking of safety, Patrick, you bring up a good point. One of the things that I was always fascinated with, my dad, after he retired from the 22 years in the Air Force, he was a flight mechanic, and he then went and worked for TWA for another 20-something years up in San Francisco, SFO. And you see the planes come and go, and you think about it at any given time. My understanding is that around the planet, and you can now track these things on an app on your phone, but around the planet at any given time, there's more than 1 million people in the air. And to think that as tragic as they are when they occur, these accidents or crashes or whatever you want to describe them as, they're so few and far in between, and you look at the total numbers. Isn't it amazing that all these very complicated machines and people that are flying them that don't necessarily even speak English or aren't born and raised in the United States are qualified to do all these things, including the mechanics in wherever, Bali or something?
And planes almost never crash, which is astounding considering what you just said, how many people are in the air at a given time. I think last year in the United States alone, about 1 billion people flew.
Wow.
And we haven't had a really catastrophic crash in this country involving at least a major airline since 2001. I mean, we're talking 17 years without a major carrier having a major crash, the kind of crash that we used to see really all the time, where you had 100, 200, 300 people killed at a time. You go back to the 60s, the 70s, all the way into the 1990s, and it wasn't unusual to have, up to a dozen or more major air crashes every year around the world. Now, if we have 1 or 2, that's a lot. That's pretty fascinating and pretty impressive.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, what if you can do that within an industry that crosses not only cultural barriers, but countries and politics and all that? If there's sort of an agreement amongst this industry that, look, safety is our number one priority here. There's certain standards that we're all going to agree to and that we're all going to comply with. It seems like that model could be used in other areas to make life better for all of us around the world.
That's a great point, and a lot of the reason for it to have happened the way it has is the collaborative efforts between airlines and regulators and kind of transnational groups like ICAO, labor unions, pilot unions, all these organizations kind of working together because the stakes are so high if a plane crashes. Airlines can be driven under if they're some way reckless or negligent, and then there's an accident. We remember ValueJet back in the 90s and
Right.
what happened to them. We've engineered away, thankfully, what used to be the most common causes of accidents to the point where they hardly happen anymore. And it's interesting because this is lost on a lot of people. You turn on the news or you go online and people get the impression that more and more planes are crashing or that more and more dangerous things are happening because of the way the media cycle works now and because of the way we have so many different media spread across so many different platforms, 24 hours a day, all vying for attention. So every little insignificant thing that happens gets spun up into a spectacle, and that gives a lot of people the idea that flying is getting more dangerous when exactly the opposite is true.
Yeah, no question. I mean, you can't really. You're just more likely to get hurt driving to work in your car than you are to be on an airplane. Well, listen, we're going to take a short break. Can you stick around for a minute with us?
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, we're talking with Patrick Smith. I'm Mike Rayford. You're listening to In Search of the Good Life Show. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this and also dig into Patrick's new Volume 2 book. It's actually a book that's been out before, Cockpit Confidential. Volume 2 just released last week. Tell you guys how to get it. Stick around. This is the Good Life Show. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. I'm Mike Rayford. You're listening to In Search of the Good Life. We're just having another great session here. We're talking right now with Patrick Smith. He's a airline pilot, commercial airline pilot. Been so for a long time. He's calling from San Francisco right now on one of his layovers, mini layovers. But he's a writer, and he's got an interesting take on things. He's got a blog, if you want to go check it out, called askthepilot.com. And we're going to dig into this in a minute. His volume 2 has just been released of Cockpit Confidential. Patrick, welcome back to the show. Tell us a little bit about just the thumbnail or what the inside book cover. How would you describe your book, Cockpit Confidential?
Yeah, Cockpit Confidential, the subtitle is Everything You Need to Know About Air Travel. There's a new second edition which just came out. The original was published about, I think 2012 or 2013. It's been totally rewritten, refreshed, updated. There's about 25% all new material inside covering the newer things that have changed since the original publication, everything from Malaysia Airlines to the different airline mergers and so on. If you click over to askthepilot.com, there's a post on the homepage where you can learn more about the new book.
Yeah. Well, I know you go into a lot of things that your book kind of appeals to if you're a geek about airplanes and flying and stuff like that. You've got sort of some of the technical stuff that we're not going to necessarily cover here today, but it's also just simple things like travel from, say, a perspective of someone who is a pilot or somebody in the airline industry. How do you think that differs? I mean, what are some of your observations, if you will? You see a lot of people standing in line with their suitcases and maybe their first time or second time travelers, and you've done this for so long. You must have slightly a jaded view on things at times.
Sometimes I look out at all the people in the airport, all the people crowding the terminal with the baby strollers, and I think, where are all these people going, and why do they have to go there?
Yeah, because that's where I'm going.
It just seems so excessive, so over the top sometimes, and that's a byproduct of the fact, as I was saying in the last segment, that flying is now so affordable. Everybody does it, and then they bring their kids, and it's just, in some ways that's good, and in some ways that's bad. Travel generally is such an interesting thing to talk about. I've traveled to about 90 countries. I was recently in Bhutan on a vacation, a lovely place.
Mm-hmm.
But for all of the mind-broadening benefits of travel and all the incredible things that you can see and experience, it in a lot of ways, there's a dark side to it too. I mean, traveling can kill your soul in a way. I mean, because it exposes you to the kind of everything that's wrong with the world. I mean, you see extreme poverty.
Right.
You see extreme environmental devastation. Flying over the Amazon, you see the clear-cutting fires, and you can be on a beach in the middle of nowhere, and you see all the plastic trash washed up on shore.
Right.
You see the slums. You see just human degradation. There have been times when I've come home from a trip and just wanted to flush my passport down the toilet.
Wow.
On the other hand, you can be in the wilds of Botswana or on a mountain in Bhutan, and it's exhilarating and inspiring. It's kind of a yin and yang, I guess, of travel, and there's actually an essay in the book where I talk about this. Good thing or bad thing, it's up to you.
Yeah, well, that's true, and I mean, we get a lot of our guests are travelers, they're bloggers, I guess, in a way, they're trying to sort of put a happy face on the idea that instead of just sitting at home in your little town, in your little pink house or whatever for your whole life, take a little bit of a punt and get out there and take a chance and go somewhere. And what I encourage people to do frequently is get out of your zip code. You go to these extreme places and I've been to a few of them too myself, where you're right. I mean, you get from the airport to get to where you want to go, you're driving in a danger. It's more dangerous than the flight, usually the taxi cab ride to wherever you're going to go. And then you're kind of getting to see at a high rate of speed what the other people that live there all the time are all about. So part of it is where it is. I think the best part of travel for me is there's occasions where you just happen to meet some really terrific people that are from there along the way, and they can sort of give you a different insight, maybe a different appreciation for, what you got back at home.
Right, and everything I just said notwithstanding, I don't want to discourage people from traveling. I just want you to maybe brace yourself for some of the things you might see. I think the world would be a better place if everybody could and did travel.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, one of our last guests was on, and they're doing he's actually a restaurateur in San Francisco in the Bay Area who's originally from Myanmar, Yangon, Myanmar. And so he came over here as a kid maybe 20 years ago, and he's been quite successful and good for him, but he wants to share and give back. So he's come up with a scholarship program for kids, high school kids in the Bay Area. But part of the deal is if they qualify and they get the scholarship, they also are required to go to a third world country and visit and work. I think he actually has them go to Myanmar, Burma, and actually work in an orphanage or something for a couple of months, with the idea that these guys aren't going to appreciate this scholarship and their education unless they're a little bit more worldly. And I think getting somebody out there, especially at a young age, really influences their future.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, we have the Peace Corps and whatnot, but I wish there was some kind of national service, so to speak, where young people in this country could, or even had to go overseas and experience the world a little bit in young adulthood to help give them a better perspective.
Absolutely agree with that.
Them the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Well, so when you are, even though you're a pilot and, people might think you get perks because you get to fly for free if you're going on hop back, deadheading it back or whatever you're doing. But what about layovers? Now, that's something that as I'm sitting here planning a couple of trips for myself, I hate laying over because it just causes so much time lag and all that. Are there any stories that you've got related to layovers and maybe how to avoid them or what to do if you get one?
Well, are we talking about a layover where you spend the night in a city or layovers at the airport between connections?
I'm always thinking that I'm going to get stuck for 2 or 3 hours, but maybe that's the key, is to make it where it's an overnighter.
Well, even if you've just got time between connections, a lot of that comes down to what airport you're laying over in. Is it LaGuardia or is it Singapore or Incheon? There are some really neat airports around the world. I just mentioned 2 of them.
I've been to Singapore. I've not been to Incheon.
Incheon is maybe my favorite airport in the world, and there's an essay in the book where I talk about that.
Well, for those who don't know, where is Incheon?
Incheon is the airport serving Seoul, Korea, South Korea, and it's such a neat place. It's maybe the most flyer-friendly airport I've been to, with just innumerable amenities. They offer free city tours. There are rooms where you can sleep and relax. It's very, very quiet. They don't drive you crazy with public address announcements the way airports in the United States do. And can we take a time out to talk about that for a minute? If there's one thing...
The white zone is for parking.
Right, from Airplane, the movie. U.S. airports really need to take a hint from their European and Asia counterparts. We don't need to be bombarded with useless public address announcements one after another. Sometimes they play on top of each other, creating this kind of unintelligible hurricane of noise. I was at LAX not long ago, and I'm at the gate, and there's an announcement blaring reminding me of which liquids I can take through security. And everybody's already past security. We're just waiting to get on the plane. There's no need for that to be playing. Flying is tedious and stressful enough, and all of this noise just pouring down on you for no good reason just makes it that much more stressful and tedious, and you don't experience that so much at airports overseas. Singapore. Did I mention Singapore? Because that's another good example.
That is a nice airport, and I'm sure
there's a swimming pool there. There's a butterfly farm. Koi ponds. It's just a relaxing place. There are actually families who go to the airport to hang out on the weekend because the terminal space is so nice and so attractive.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I'm actually getting the itch to go to both Singapore and Incheon now just to hang out at the airport for a while, really. Now, have you flown in and out? This is just a side question that came to me because recently I had somebody on that invited me to come over to Shanghai. They were talking about how Shanghai was, how did he put it? He says it's the best... How do you say it? It's the most democratic form of communism there is, or something to that effect. It was just amazing. Have you been to that airport?
I was at Shanghai once, transferring between flights. I had a pretty quick connection, so I didn't really get to savor it, if that's the right word. It seems pretty impressive, new and shiny and big and quiet.
Right.
Which for me is important. And everything I just said aside, I want to make it clear that there are some cool airports in the U.S. They tend not to be the biggest ones, although some of the bigger ones are pretty decent. San Francisco, Boston, my hometown airport, I think, is very underrated.
Is that Logan?
Logan, correct. Portland, Oregon, DCA, Reagan National, whatever we have to call it nowadays. The architecture, at least there, is really attractive. The Indianapolis airport, the new Indy airport is, I almost want to say spectacular. It is at Terminal 2, I think it is at Raleigh-Durham, of all places.
Wow.
You'd swear you were in Munich or somewhere in Europe. I mean, it's a very nice terminal. So they're out there, but they tend to be the exception in the United States.
Right. Well, I know that I was flying out of SFO a couple of years ago, and it was when they were doing their big remodel, and it's hard enough to drive in and out of there anyway because of all the weird loops and clover leaves and all the other stuff that they've got going on. And it was just chaos for a couple of years. But, as you say, the end result, and I'll throw one out from my little area up here. The Sacramento airport has had a nice redo, and it's looking pretty good, too, for sort of what I might consider. You think of California and the state capital of California as not a little rural thing, but our airport is kind of like a little rural airport, although it's international. It's a smallish one, but they did a nice job. Anyway, Patrick, it's been great having you on the show again. Gosh, we're going to have to do this more often. I think we'll have to have you back once in a while because this is fun, sort of getting to know step by step so we're not overblown away. But one last story I did want to cover, and we're all frustrated with the security of everything, or I'm trying to come up with a turn of a phrase, but basically the TSA system. Obviously, all these things changed when the big towers went down and all that happened back in 2001, 9/11, but it doesn't seem to have evolved towards anything very practical or thoughtful, just sort of like we're in control and you're not, and here's what you have to do, and we're in charge the whole time. What's with the shoe thing? I mean, some airports now are not requiring it and some are. Do you know anything about that? Like some airports don't require it.
It can vary, I think, airport to airport. Security is something we could spend all day talking about separately, and you just made a great point, which is all this many years after 9/11, we still have what feels like a chaotic sort of jury-rigged system that is just oppressive more than anything else. And the huge irony here, and this is something I talk about in a segment in the book in Chapter 6, I think it is that the 9/11 attacks were not a failure of airport security. They really had nothing to do with airport security. Yet so much of our emphasis since then has been on the concourse checkpoint. What the hijackers took advantage of in 2001 wasn't a loophole or a weakness in airport security. It was taking advantage of our mindset and what our understanding of a hijacking was and how it was going to unfold based on years and years and years of precedent. What tools, what weapons the guys had didn't matter. They could have used anything, just a sharpened stick. It wasn't about that. It was about the greater strategy of what they were going to do and what we thought they were going to do. And that seems to have been lost on everybody. And it's too bad. And the other big fundamental flaw in our system now is we treat every single person as a potential terrorist. And I'm sorry, but in a system where you have millions of people flying every day, that's just not workable or sustainable. But we keep forcing it, and that's why the lines are so long and people are so frustrated. And sadly, we've just taken it in stride, and we've become acclimated and used to it. And I don't know if there's ever going to be any going back. Yeah,
well, I know you've mentioned something about the TSA or the security there is searching for weapons rather than the people who might actually use these weapons. And as you mentioned, I mean, a ballpoint pen could become a weapon, or an empty water bottle or something like that could become a weapon of some sort. Do you think political correctness has just gone so far that it's actually making life dangerous for us in a way because we're not willing to sort of quote unquote profile certain types of people?
Well, I mean, profiling in this context isn't what people think. It's you can't profile based strictly on ethnicity or national origin. That's not going to work when it comes to airport security because it's so easy for a perpetrator to work around that.
Right.
You have to have a bigger system that takes in all different data points and comes up with some kind of profile that is a mishmash of maybe including some of those things, but there have to be other factors as well. And is it going to be perfect? No, but it can't be. I mean, we're never going to be 100% safe. And ultimately, I think the job of keeping air travel safe from terrorism, it's not the job of people on the concourse. It's not the screeners. It's something that happens backstage. It's the TSA and FBI and CIA and people working to break up plots and catch people before they get to the airport.
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, on that happy note, we will definitely have you back. And you say you're headed back over to West Africa at some point. I'd love to hear about some of that stuff. But I want to encourage everybody to go to your website, askthepilot.com. You can check out the new book there. You can go to Amazon and buy it. It's just a fun blog. You're a great writer, by the way, Patrick. I love the way you just ramble on. You kind of take a different angle on things. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today on the show.
Oh, thanks a lot, Mike. Anytime. We should do let's do a live show from Africa sometime.
That sounds great. Let's see the time zone. Yeah, well, if you're willing to be up at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, that might be okay.
Oh, sure.
All right, Patrick. Well, safe flights to you, man, and have a great trip. And thanks so much again for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
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 Thank you.
All right,